Anqunette Sarfoh. Q, it's good to have you on the show. How are you?
I am fantastic, Ronnie. How are you?
I'm great. I am so happy to see all the success that you've been having, and also just sharing your voice on such an important topic. Q, as a lot of people may know, we were former co-workers at Fox 2, and she has gone on to be a cannabis entrepreneur, but also you're such a huge advocate and an important voice for this topic as well here in the state of Michigan. So for those that aren't familiar with your journey, do you want to fill them in?
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So as you mentioned, I was the morning anchor at Fox for about 8 years or so. I developed multiple sclerosis around 7 years ago. And as my condition progressed, my doctor suggested that I medically retire because, as we all know, that TV can be stressful, and it wasn't the healthiest thing for me to get up every morning at 3:30 in the morning and then do 4 hours of live TV. And so, and I had some issues that were going on at the time, and so it was a good decision for me to take a step back and focus on my health. And so, at the same time, I went from being a fairly healthy person. I completed a couple of marathons back in the day, but was a fairly healthy person. Didn't take pharmaceuticals, maybe an allergy pill every once in a while. But after I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I was put on a total of 9 pharmaceuticals. And unfortunately, I did not feel better. I quite often felt much worse. After the 3rd trip to the hospital for unrelenting vomiting, sorry if anyone's eating right now, my apologies. But after the 3rd trip to the hospital, my husband suggested, he bluntly stated that I should just smoke a joint. And I did smoke a joint, and I realized that my nausea was alleviated. And over the course of a couple of months, in addition to changing my diet is important, and I always tell people that, but I was able to wean myself off of all 9 pharmaceuticals. And realizing that I was using plants, in a diet, and also plant-based medicine and cannabis, that there are still so many restrictions surrounding cannabis medication and cannabis use, because not everyone uses it medicinally. And so I decided that it was time, and it was appropriate for me to just, to borrow the phrase of the day, state my truth. And the truth was that I was using this, and people were being unfairly penalized for it. And I was lucky that first to live in Michigan, because it gives citizens the right to write their own laws and push and advocate for the laws that they feel are important. So I joined first MI Legalize. They were the top advocacy group at the time that was pushing for legalization, and I joined their efforts, and they were gracious enough to welcome me wholeheartedly. And I will always have a debt of gratitude to the advocates of this movement, because they welcomed me and they helped me along the way. And through their help, I was able to help other people. So I joined the legalization efforts, and I'm happy to say that in 2018, November of 2018, Election Day, the voters showed what they wanted, and they passed adult use legalization. So in the interim, I was a part of a group of entrepreneurs in the Detroit and Warren area, and we opened Botanic on Election Day in 2018. It was quite successful, and we attracted the eyes of a multi-state operator who gave us an offer within months after we opened Botanic. It took about a year for the sale to be completed, but it was completed in February of this year. So I'm a stock owner of Liberty now. The provisioning center has been renamed Liberty, but quite a few of the employees who started the journey with us at Botanic are still there, and so I always have a special place in my heart for the people there. So let's see, I think I guess that's a nutshell. So we sold Botanic. I'm right now in the process of starting a CBD line. I also want to start a THC line, an edibles line. But unfortunately, the price of a key ingredient right now is, there's a shortage of that in Michigan. That's called THC distillate. And right now it's running about 5 times higher than normal. And so unless I want to sell gummies for $50 a bag, I won't start that branch of my of what I'm doing right now. But instead, I have started to do more with CBD, and I'm going to launch a CBD line hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I'm also a board member of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, so we represent business owners and people who are in the industry. We are advocating for a fair and just and equitable industry that we have the privilege of building from the ground up. So I work with municipalities in that aspect. I'm on a state work group that's trying to come up with ways to make sure the social equity and racial equity components of this legislation are addressed fairly. And and I also volunteer with the League of Women Voters because it is important for all of us to exercise our rights to vote. So we are nonpartisan, but it's a great opportunity for people to know their rights and to express their rights and to share their voice and be involved in politics. No matter where you stand, we all have a voice and we all should be heard. And I think that's just about it.
Which basically means Q has been extremely busy since leaving Fox 2, and I'm so happy to hear that your health is doing better, because it is a hard world to navigate in trying to figure out, that cocktail and the medications and what actually works and what doesn't. So to know that you're able to do this and also be able to speak openly and freely about it, because I think it does open that conversation, and also it takes some of that negative stereotype away from people who do use marijuana for health reasons. And again, just to let people know, you're listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH in Bloomfield Hills. And knowing that, though, Q, I wonder, how are things going, though, because for the federal government, marijuana is still illegal, and so that has to pose a different set of challenges.
Well, as someone who has been kicked out of a few banks, yes, it does. It does indeed. The cannabis industry, for a large part, is still shunned by the banking industry. And so while we have found workarounds to make sure that customers can and patients can complete their transactions safely and efficiently, yes, the banking aspect is the biggest hindrance to furthering the industry. From a personal standpoint, I was kicked out of several banks, and we didn't even have a business at the time. It was just my involvement in cannabis. Basically led to them asking me to please remove my funds from their bank, or they would send it to me. So it affects employees and their abilities to secure mortgages and lines of credit. It's a really unfair system placed on this industry. And mind you, we do pay taxes. And so we are legally compliant. We are more compliant than quite a few other businesses. I don't know. I had to submit 3 years of all of my financial information to be granted a license in this business. We have been thoroughly vetted. And so to deny us banking access is incredibly unfair and short-sighted. So I would think that's the major hindrance in this field right now is the banks that are being hesitant to work with us. And don't get me wrong, some banks are working with us. They tend to work with us on a very secretive basis. We can't disclose who we're banking with and all of that. And then if something happens, as you know, Botanics suffered a break-in, and as soon as that happened and it made news, we lost our banking services that day. So you have to deal with things like that. It's an exciting industry, and it's one that's always changing. But the federal prohibitions affect banking for the industry. But when you look at patient access, I'm from Indiana. Indiana doesn't even have a medical program. And I'm also, when I became a patient here in Michigan, it also gave me the opportunity to become a caregiver, which meant that I was responsible and I was helping people navigate their way through cannabis medicine. And so anyway, you're working with a population whose doctors are saying to them, I want you, why don't you try medical marijuana? But I can't tell you how to use it. Do you have to figure that out on your own? And doctors are prohibited from discussing issues that would lead to better health outcomes for their patients. And they're prohibited because of these restrictive federal laws. We had a lot of veterans work on our petition drive, and that's why in Michigan, there's $25 million set aside for PTSD research, specifically for veterans. But yet at the VA, the doctors are not allowed to talk to their patients about cannabis. There's a huge disconnect, and it's hurting businesses and it's hurting people. So at least descheduling it would be helpful. And I feel a great compromise, because as I was saying earlier, when I look at what's happening in Indiana, when I go home, my mother's church friends just want arthritis cream. It doesn't get you high, but it has THC in it, and so therefore it is not legal in Indiana. So I'm like, hey, meet you at the border. What you do with it is on you. And you'll notice that quite a few of our provisioning centers that are along the borders of either Indiana or Ohio are some of the highest grossing provisioning centers in the state. So there is a demand for this substance, for this plant. And the federal government is holding it up for reasons that are not in the best interests of patients or businesses, in my opinion.
Anqunette Sarfoh with us. She is a board member at the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, joining us on the Oakland County MegaCast this morning. And Q, you mentioned earlier on that you've done a lot of work in terms of addressing the racial injustices that are facing people in the state of Michigan and really all throughout the U.S. regarding cannabis and regarding marijuana. Governor Gretchen Whitmer recently signed into legislation the Clean Slate Act, which would allow people with low-level marijuana charges to be eligible for expungement in some cases. Do you care to talk a little bit about what that bill means for the state of many people in this state here in Michigan, and what that will mean for them as they are retaking part of their life that was essentially taken away from them for using something that is now legal in the state of Michigan?
Glad you asked. I was honored to have the opportunity to speak to the Senate Judiciary Committee in regard to that package of bills. And I'm proud, actually, and relieved. It was a part of a promise that so many of us in the legalization circles, when we went to community centers and church basements and we talked to people, they would always ask us, well, what's going to happen to people who have records if you guys are going to be able to, make money off of it? What about all these people? And because of the law, we could not have both issues on the ballot at the time. And so we promised a lot of people that we were going to fight to make sure expungement is a part of this. And so, yeah, it took, I testified probably maybe a month or two ago. And at that time, I recounted that it had already been like 600 days since the election, and people wanted this. So I'm happy. I'm happy that not only has this passed, but I'm grateful that it passed in a bipartisan manner. That Senator Pete Lucido, along with Senator Sherry Gay Dagnogo, and also Jeff Irwin, Senator Irwin, so many people worked across the aisle, because they just saw this not as a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. It's just an issue of fairness. The state's own data showed that these laws were inappropriately applied to more people of color than white people. So to finally try to make amends for that is great. And what that means is people who got caught versus people who did not get caught. For those people who got caught, they are still suffering so many barriers to just having a decent life. Be it, getting employment, gaining employment. There were some people who testified about how it's the difference between making $10 an hour versus $26 an hour. Some people were denied access to trades because they had minor possession records. And that shouldn't be. You serve your time and you should be able to get on with your life. And one lady in particular brought up a fascinating point that I hadn't realized, but she spoke from the victim's point of view. She's like, when you unfairly restrict people's ability to make more money, you affect their ability to pay restitution to their victims. And I had never even considered that, which I'm ashamed to say I hadn't considered that. But that's a valid point. So no, I feel that this is a great step in the right direction to making amends and acknowledging that this was a mistake, and these people no longer need to suffer because of it. So I'm very happy. I'm grateful that that this package of bills has passed, and it's not just about cannabis crimes. It's about other types of misdemeanors. You know, people shouldn't have to serve a life sentence for either a misjudgment, a mistake. We all make them. So how much punishment is enough? And so I'm glad that the state of Michigan has decided in this case, this amount of punishment has been enough.
Progress can be made when people get behind and stand together and advocate for an issue. So thank you for doing so much on this issue. And Q, what do you think the future of the cannabis industry is going to be here in the state of Michigan? I know in our neighborhood, they've been coming around trying to be able to open, allow for them to one or two to open. In our community, it's been voted down before, so they're trying again. Are more communities opting out? And if so, do you think that's going to start to change as this becomes more streamlined and mainstream?
I think that more communities will opt in. I think right now there's a lot of confusion. I was actually on a conference call with Director Briscoe yesterday as they're looking at ways to work on the law that dictates how these programs will be rolling out across the state, the final draft of the law. And there is a lot of confusion with municipalities, and there's a lot of confusion with municipalities because they are terrified of being sued. And so it's easier for them to just opt out than to engage with the industry. And so we have a lot of people and municipalities that are operating on fear. And I can't blame them because they have to listen to their constituents, and their constituents are also afraid. It's unfortunate that we have a lot of people who are drafting laws about this industry, but they've not given themselves the opportunity to look into the industry. I would go and speak to many city council meetings, and so many people were writing legislations, just writing off the industry en masse, and they had never stepped foot inside a provisioning center. There is still this image that these are dens of ill repute, and people are, and really if you walk into the average provisioning center, it's a 53-year-old guy who has back pain and doesn't want to drink scotch all day. And yeah, of course you have a lot of young people who like the plant, sure, and we can address that. But when it comes to municipalities, there is this misperception that these are drug dens. And so we in the industry have to first find a way to refute that image. And when I owned Botanic, I would always say to people, please come and just check out Botanic. You don't have to have a card. Tell them that Q said you could visit. But now there are lots of other adult use establishments, and they're beautiful facilities. It's I say to people, if you don't care about a liquor store being in your community, you really shouldn't care about a cannabis store being in your community. A lot of people use cannabis because they choose not to actually drink alcohol, and the medical research says it's actually better for you to indulge in occasional cannabis use versus alcohol use. It's much better for your body. So these are people who are actually trying to make healthier choices in some cases. When you look at the fastest growing population of cannabis users is people over 50. And these are people who are using it to get a better night's sleep because they want to do their jobs better. They actually want to go to work and be better employees. And so I think that we in the cannabis industry and our associated groups, we have to continue to show another aspect of the industry and of our businesses, because if we don't, then this industry is going to stagnate. However, I do feel that the financial implications of the pandemic this year have some municipalities taking a look at their budgets and wondering how can they add to their revenue base. And cannabis has proven to be a pretty good bet. It was deemed an essential business during the pandemic, and we have seen people have been leaning on provisioning centers to learn more about ways to manage stress, aches and pains. Some people are losing insurance and they're looking for alternatives to some pharmaceuticals. And so we are an asset to communities, and hopefully as more and more people are willing to take a look at us, just an unbiased view at the businesses in your community, you'll see that we are one of the most compliant businesses in any community. And our goal is to be successful and to help people. So yeah, we're good for neighborhoods. So hopefully more and more municipalities will see that this is a safe way to add to their tax revenue and help the people of their community. It could be a win-win if they just give us a chance.
Anqunette Sarfoh with us. She's a board member of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, joining us on the Oakland County MegaCast. Q, just another couple minutes with you. And as someone who has family and has friends who are also afflicted with multiple sclerosis, and knowing how much that cannabis has aided them in their survival and their ability to deal with the pain that comes with MS, I can't thank you enough for your advocacy for those with MS in our local community. Just another minute or so with you before we have to say goodbye. Is there anything else that would be important for our audience to know today?
Just get out there and vote. It matters. Please get out there and vote. That's it. And welcome cannabis businesses into your community, and look out for the launch of my brand, Culture with the Q, hopefully in a couple of weeks.
Well, when you launch it and you get it up and running, we'll have you back on the show, because we could continue this conversation for quite some time. Thank you again for your time, and again, having the courage to stand up and be an advocate and use your position and your voice to change so many other lives.